On August 21st, 1986, a lake killed 1,746 people, not with an explosion, not with a flood, not with an earthquake. It simply exhaled, and within 16 miles the air stopped being air. What you are about to hear is not a metaphor. It is physics. And physics does not negotiate. It is 1986 in northwestern Cameroon. Thousands of farmers live in mud brick villages at the bottom of deep river valleys, carved by centuries of erosion. These valleys look like stone corridors, narrow, deep, sealed on all sides. Above them, at 3,500 feet of elevation, sits Lake Nyos. Hidden. That is the right word. It rests at the bottom of an ancient volcanic crater, surrounded by walls rising 300 feet on every side. There is only one natural way out. A narrow spillway cuts into the northern rim of the crater. It is barely 20 feet wide. On the other side, the terrain drops 400 feet into a network of rocky corridors. If a dense, heavy mass passes through that spillway, it has nowhere to go but down, directly into the villages below, directly into people's bedrooms. The locals called it good land. They were right about the farming. They could not know about the rest. What makes this story even harder to accept is what had happened 2 years earlier, just 60 miles away. In 1984, Lake Monone, a crater lake of the same type, had already killed 37 people. The mechanism was identical. A volcanologist studied the disaster, understood what had happened, and according to multiple accounts, submitted a warning paper to the journal Science before the Lake Nyos catastrophe even occurred. The reviewers rejected the manuscript. They called it too far-fetched. No early warning systems were installed. The region remained blind. The villages went to sleep. There are 3 people whose night we are going to follow. Ephraim Che is a farmer. His house sits on a cliff, directly above the edge of the crater. Halima Suli is a cattle herder. She lives on the lakeshore, surrounded by her extended family and 400 head of cattle. Joseph Nkwane is a truck driver. He lives in the village of Subum, 12 miles down the valley. That evening, he is sitting under a kerosene lamp, helping his 9-year-old daughter finish her homework. None of them know that deep beneath the dark water of the lake, something irreversible has already begun. At 680 feet below the surface, the equivalent of a 60-story skyscraper completely underwater, the pressure reaches 300 pounds per square inch, the kind of pressure you would find inside the hydraulic lines of industrial machinery. Under that pressure, the bottom layer of the lake had spent decades quietly absorbing dissolved volcanic carbon dioxide, saturated, charged, held in place by nothing but the weight of water above it. Picture a giant soda bottle that someone has been shaking for years and never opened. Around 9:30 in the evening, something displaced a portion of that deep water upward. What exactly caused it? No investigation has ever determined that. Maybe a cold rainstorm that chilled one edge of the surface. Maybe a small landslide on the lakebed. The trigger remains officially unknown. What followed, however, was pure physics. When water saturated with carbon dioxide began rising, the pressure dropped, exactly like opening a soda bottle. The carbon dioxide came violently out of solution. The water became less dense, which drove it even higher. The reaction became unstoppable within seconds. A fountain erupted above the lake. It was estimated at nearly 300 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty. A surge wave scoured the shoreline, but the water was not the primary weapon. The lake had just exhaled between 100,000 and 300,000 tons of cold, dense carbon dioxide in a single breath. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air. It does not rise. It sinks. It flows like an invisible liquid, following the terrain downhill. A gas cloud 50 meters thick poured over the northern spillway. Picture a 16-story building lying on its side, rolling downhill, filling every street, every yard, every room from the floor up. It moved through the valleys at 30 miles per hour, on foot, in the dark, on mountain paths. There was no outrunning it. The gas was colorless, silent, odorless. At 10% carbon dioxide concentration, unconsciousness comes within a few breaths. When the cloud reached Subum, Joseph smelled something like rotten eggs. Carbon dioxide has no odor. What he experienced was almost certainly an olfactory hallucination. The brain, under acute oxygen deprivation, can generate false sensory signals. Joseph took a few breaths. He tried to stand, and he collapsed into a coma at the table where he had been helping his daughter. He survived only because he was on the outer fringe of the cloud, where drafts passing through the porous, mud brick walls of his house still offered thin pockets of breathable air. He came to 36 hours later, covered in pressure sores that emergency responders initially mistook for chemical burns. What happened in the rest of the valley that night reveals something deeply cruel about the nature of this disaster. Every survival instinct became a death sentence. Those who woke up and tried to run died faster. Running means hyperventilation. Every deep breath pulled in a larger dose. Their bodies were found on the roads, at the topographically lowest points in the valley, where the flow was densest. Those who slept on the floor, on woven mats, died quietly, never waking. The gas filled homes from the ground up. The floor was the maximum concentration zone. We are all taught the same fire safety rule: stay low, because the air is cleaner down there. That night, that rule was lethal. In the village of Subum, a rural maternity clinic stood. A building with a ground floor and a second floor. The gas cloud had a hard, physical ceiling. 160 feet above that boundary, there was no gas. Everyone on the ground floor died. Everyone on the second floor woke up alive, one flight of stairs. No heroism, no struggle, just altitude. At dawn, Ephraim descended into the valley. The cloud had passed beneath him like a river under a bridge. Below, the local waterfall had gone dry. The lake had turned a deep rust brown. Oxidized iron pulled up from the bottom. Standing at the water's edge was Halima, the cattle herder, the one whose home had been at ground zero. She was screaming. Around her, 31 dead relatives, 400 dead cattle. She was alive, with no satisfying official explanation. The turbulence at the edges of a gas density current is non-linear. A random eddy, the micro-relief of the shoreline, a pocket of oxygen, exactly where she fell. Survival that night had nothing to do with distance from the crater. It came down to altitude above the gas layer and blind chance. Air is not obligated to let you breathe. In the days that followed, the world learned the full scale of the disaster. 1,746 official deaths. Entire villages had ceased to exist within minutes. Thousands of survivors had to be evacuated. Dead livestock covered the countryside for miles. What scientists would later call a limnic eruption, a sudden release of gas from the depths of a lake, was a phenomenon most geologists had never encountered before. Lake Nyos had just written it into the textbooks in the most brutal way possible. The critical question emerged immediately: Could this happen again somewhere else? The answer was yes. Several other crater lakes in Central Africa showed the same characteristics. Lake Kivu, on the border between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, is considered the most dangerous lake of this type in the world. Its shores are home to several million people. Its dissolved gas content is orders of magnitude greater than Lake Nyos ever was. Faced with this risk, engineers developed a solution as simple as it was bold: degar the lake in a controlled way before it releases its gas catastrophically on its own. A pipe is lowered into the deep carbon dioxide saturated layers. The natural water pressure drives the gas upward through the pipe, creating a fountain at the surface. The lake slowly releases its gas load, harmlessly. The first installations were put in place at Lake Nyos in the early 2000s, and carbon dioxide levels in the deep layers have been declining steadily ever since. But the lake continues to receive volcanic carbon dioxide from below. The current pipes do not pump fast enough to fully offset that input. The work is not finished. The tragedy of Lake Nyos raises a question that goes beyond geology. It asks how societies handle scientific warnings that seem improbable, counterintuitive, or simply uncomfortable. The volcanologist had seen this coming. He had warned people, and he had been dismissed, not out of malice, but out of disbelief. A lake that kills by asphyxiation, with no explosion and no visible warning, through a silent nocturnal exhale. It sounds like science fiction, except it is not. It sounds like chemistry, and like valleys that act as funnels, and like families sleeping on the floor. We build our warning systems around what we have already seen. Firefighters know fire. Seismologists know earthquakes. But a lake that breathes, that exhales carbon dioxide as an invisible wave in the dark, that requires someone to have seen it first, to have been believed, and for institutions to have responded in time. In 1986, none of those three conditions were met. Joseph survived. He recovered slowly. His daughter had been beside him. She was alive too. Halima survived. Nobody can fully explain why. Ephraim survived because he lived above the ceiling of the cloud, on his cliff overlooking the crater. 3 survivors, 3 different reasons. Altitude, the outer edge of a lethal cloud. Pure chance. The air you are breathing right now is a precise mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, and a trace amount of carbon dioxide. Change those proportions enough, and consciousness disappears before you have had time to understand what is happening. No pain, no alarm, just sleep, and then nothing. The Earth is an active chemical system. It has been producing gases for billions of years. Sometimes geography creates the exact conditions for those gases to accumulate somewhere, under pressure, for decades, before releasing everything in a single night. Lake Nyos is not an anomaly. It is a reminder. A reminder that some of the most lethal forces on this planet make no sound. They do not explode, do not burn, do not rumble. They simply exhale. And the air around you, the air you take for granted with every single breath, is not a constant. It is a balance. Fragile, local, and sometimes at the bottom of a stone valley in northwestern Cameroon, temporary.